Good evening, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. It's Wednesday, November the 22nd, 2017, 6 o'clock p.m. here in Council Chambers. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. We all appreciate it. We've been working through all of the different points in regards to the upcoming budget for 2018. This is an important night where it is we hear from the public. What you like, what you don't like, what you want added, what you want cut, whatever it is, we're here to listen to you. So to start things off, just some ground rules. You'll have 5 minutes. Just put my glasses on here. Each delegation has 5 minutes. You'll hear a chime when there's 30 seconds left. So that gives you a little bit of a warning. And I would appreciate it if we stuck to the 5 minutes, because that's just the way it works. That's fair for everybody. If you're obviously just wrapping up a final sentence or two, I'll obviously let that happen, but I'd really appreciate it if you keep it to the 5 minutes. And then after each person speaks, I'll open it up if there's any questions from councillors or myself as well. And we'll work our way through it, and then at the end I'll give some further guidelines and to council if you want to think about it throughout the evening, but obviously you'll be listening to the delegations. But remember, tonight is our intentions night, right? So just remember that as well. So I'll turn it over to, would it be you, Tara, for opening remarks? Or is there any opening remarks tonight from anybody? Or did I handle that pretty good? All right, let the minutes show I did opening remarks pretty good. Okay, so why don't we start right in with Aaron Harvey, who is from the Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition. And just before you start, Aaron, just any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof from any member of council about what we see in front of us tonight? Seeing none. And now you're not going to like what I'm going to say. I know, all the councillors. We do have, we know that there's a lot of love in the room tonight, and I appreciate that. But for decorum purposes within these chambers, we would just ask that you respect not, you know, pom-poms I saw walking in the room here tonight, and things like that. And that's not me trying to be mean. Those are the rules, and my job here as the chair is to uphold those rules of decorum here, and I think all of you would respect that. The reason why it's important is you never know who's coming up after you, right? And maybe there'll be a different point of view, and we want to make this room here very comfortable and the atmosphere here comfortable to hear all points of view. So is everyone with me on that one? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So go right ahead. Your 5 minutes begins right now. Thank you very much. And did you want to use maybe the microphone to your left? Okay. Yeah. Is that good?
Oh, it picks me up? Okay,
go ahead.
That's perfect. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Guthrie, council, city staff, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me to come and speak tonight. My name is Aaron Harvey. I am the co-chair of the Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition. I am also, in my day job, Director of Service at Family and Children's Services, and I'm a member of the GNSC as a representative of FNCS. I'm here to tell you a little bit about the history of the GNSC, because our agency has, along with the city, been a long-standing supporter of the GNSC. Sorry, I'm going to cut through my slides a bit. I'm a bit worried I'll go over time. So from between 1990 and 2009, we had our first neighborhood groups, and around 1990, that was Brant Waverley and Onward Willow. Between 1990 and 2009, those two neighborhood groups grew to 11. They were supported by the city, and they were supported by FNCS. The city supported the neighborhood groups with city staff that provided oversight for the neighborhood group staff who are running programs and supporting leadership in the neighborhood groups. The city provided HR, payroll, finance, legal support, and supported the neighborhood group leadership teams with their business, like minutes, agendas, proper finance, and proper accounting. FNCS, we provided 4 community development workers in 5 neighborhood groups, and mostly their job was working with families and children. They did also provide some support to the leadership groups as well. In 2008-2009, it was a big time for the GNSC because the city was beginning to talk about how to make the GNSC sustainable for the future. There was a lot of flexibility and informality in neighborhood groups that doesn't exist, of course, in formal institutions. And so there was, I think, some hopes that that flexibility could be maintained, sustained into the future. And you know, did we have the model right? So that sustainable, the SNEF framework that most of you are familiar with began around that time. It was a multi-stakeholder consultation process. There were more partners that joined at that time, from 2 to 8, and a final report of that SNEF committee really recommended the GNSC as it is now. The city, at the time of incorporation, which we did in 2012, the city provided funding for. They provided funding continued funding for the existing staff and programs of the 11 neighborhood groups. And some neighborhood groups had no staff, some neighborhood groups had 2 or 3 staff, and some neighborhood groups did activities. They continued to fund all of those things that they had done before. They also provided staffing an amount to provide for 1 staff person and some administrative costs. We also, at that time, got a Trillium grant of about $150,000. Our agency at FNCS provided about $50,000 at that time. We had a little bit of year-end money that we were able to give, but it was a one-time only thing. So between 2012 and present, we moved from 11 to 13 neighborhood groups. We increased from 8 to 10 partner organizations. What happens at those neighborhood groups? We have after-school programs, summer camps, collective kitchens, community gardens, run and read, backpacks, community events, coffee hours, clothing closets, peer supports, food cupboards, newcomer groups, yoga, Zumba, homework clubs, parenting supports, etc. That is, in 2016, was 262 programs, 52,000 participants, 8 summer camps, 1,400 children attended those summer camps, 60 youth were leaders in training, 40 youth were counselors. Now remember, these are kids that don't typically have the same access to networks, to opportunities, to camp that other kids do. The neighborhood groups take in some of the most vulnerable kids in our community. 1,500 volunteers that did 35,000 hours, totaling about $612,000 of in-kind contribution at a living wage of $16.50 an hour. So I'm not going to recap, there's no time. So in 2017, we and the board of directors feel that there's a shortfall of about $100,000. We need 3 staff members. We have currently sustainable funding for 1. That $100,000 would go to staff support, supervision, program oversight, and risk management. Currently there's 1 position, we need 2 more. We're seen as a major contributor to many city and agency initiatives. We have trusted relationships with community leaders that other organizations just don't have. And organizations rely on the social capital of the GNSC to have access to citizens and to community leaders. Sorry, okay, sorry, one last comment, if I may. We are the most successful we have ever hoped we could be. We want to sustain those successes. In the future, we do have ideas of how we can grow further, but we'll come back another year and ask for more money. This year, we're asking for $100,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Erin, and thank you for the presentation. Maybe that was the crowd that came in after I said my rules. So for those that were here beforehand, maybe you could whisper to the other people just again about keeping decorum within the room, okay? I have a question from Councillor Downer.
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Bear. I have just 2 questions. So I attended that ACE Day, so Adverse Childhood Experiences Day, about taking a community to help these kids. How do you, from your perspective, as from you said manager of program at
FNCS, Director of Service, yep.
Your Director of Service. What do you feel is the impact of the Neighborhood Support Coalition on families and children at risk?
You know, in child welfare, the provincial data shows that we have 89% of the families that we serve are families who are not, there is no acute abuse. 11% of our cases in Ontario are acute abuse, and the kind of cases that the kind of situations that we all want children to be protected from. 89% of those kids live in families that have problems, of families that have slipped through the social safety net, addictions, mental health, poverty. And so those kids do not need the intervention of child welfare. Sometimes, for a short period of time, to make sure there's people around those kids that can keep them safe when their parents are struggling, the neighborhood groups are an amazing way to find networks and have lots of eyes on kids and build that village around kids, one relationship at a time. And we know from research that children's brains develop through relationships. And that's the information that I think you heard on the adverse childhood experiences. Neuroscience is telling us that in those early years of child brain development, that if you have chaos and scary things going on around you, it affects your brain development. Positive relationships results in the lives of children, results in healthy communities. And that we won't need to continue to do downstream funding for things like hospitals, ambulances, police, if we get it right at the front end. So it's really about getting it right at the front end, which neighborhood groups can do like nobody else.
Thanks. So it's that kind of formal and informal supports that are so important.
Absolutely.
The other question I had around was the community development program, and I think you mentioned it in the slides, but as long as I was around FNCS, you had a lot of prevention programs, and my understanding is that this provided in-kind services. Do you still have that program, or? We,
in 2009, and this was a sort of unfortunate timing with the sort of the rethinking of, with the SNF, sort of rethinking of the structure and the kind of supports that both of our organizations would be giving to the neighborhood, the GNSC. We had an overnight directive from the provincial government to stop funding the community development worker positions because the province's position at that time was those children and those families were not eligible for service in that a child had not yet been hurt. So in my cheeky way of saying the province didn't want us supporting kids before they got hurt, we had to wait till after they got hurt, and of course that doesn't make sense. But in fairness to the ministry, that's not what they felt that our child welfare funding was meant for. And so we have been back at the table. You're going to hear more from Rochelle Devereaux and Jennifer McLeod later about how we have kind of gone back to the table and been as creative as we can. We now have parent outreach workers, which are doing very similar work, much more focused strictly on families and children, whereas the community development workers did lots more of supporting the community leaders, and they were working in doing more of the sort of the broader, less directly related to child welfare. So the parent outreach workers are doing only work with families now.
Okay, thanks. So the struggle continues on prevention.
It does. Not as big as it was. It's gone from a sort of a $400,000 program to now I think it's about $220,000. So, and we want it to grow. We want a parent outreach worker in every neighborhood group. Okay. And we are advocating with the province, I should tell you that, and to continue to try and find funds for those. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoffman.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Guthrie. Thank you for your presentation, Aaron, and I can't believe you could be cheeky.
Takes one to know one, June. Sorry, is that...
Point of order?
That's
yeah. Normally I'd call a point of order, but I'll let that one go.
She's right.
So, Aaron, I want to talk about the funding request of $100,000, and I would like to know if the funding request was denied, would the Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition have to cut programs? And if so, what would that look like?
We've talked about this at the board, and we have been very concerned. We actually even talked about it for this year, but we were able to scrape together the dollars to get through this year. We just feel that we don't have the oversight we need. So in order to get that oversight, we really do need to ensure that we have a minimum of two, an executive director and a supervisor, to make sure that the people in the neighborhood groups are getting the kind of support that they need to make sure that we're managing risk. And so in order to do that, we would need to cut some programs, cut some hours in order to claw back some of that money in order to maintain at least that one other position. And that's not going to be enough. We need two other positions, but that we talked about that being an interim to, as we continue to try and find more money for 3 full positions.
And Councillor Alt.
Thank you very much, Mayor Guthrie. Through you to Ms. Harvey. First of all, a couple of comments. Ms. Harvey, I'm quite familiar with Onward Willow Better Beginnings and the Exhibition Park Neighborhood Group. Certainly Onward Willow has done some fantastic work with regards to harm and drug reduction. And what I think is the coolest thing is that the Willow Road area has gone from having the highest pregnancy rate in Guelph to having teenage pregnancy rate to the lowest teenage pregnancy rate. And certainly I can congratulate the neighborhoods group for that kind of a success. The Exhibition Park neighborhood group, they hold a mean dance party at the E-Bar, and I'm glad that I accidentally went there when I had been told it was an adult dance party, but what the heck, the kids had fun. The question that I have is a really serious one, and it relates to something within the history, and that's about Trillium grants and other grants. I appreciate that groups such as the Neighborhood Support Coalition are constantly searching for grants, maybe to support the North End Harvest Market or other projects. But I was wondering if you could just outline how that becomes a tremendous consumer of time, because I believe it must. If you're constantly chasing grants, you can't get on with the business of developing neighborhoods. Am I correct or not?
Absolutely. And that has been a big concern of the board, is that Brendan has spent so much time chasing tiny little grants, 2,000, 5,000. Every once in a while we get excited for 10,000. They're 1-year grants. Trillium was a 3-year grant at 150,000 over 3 years, and those are wonderful grants to get, but they're not long-term sustainable grants. We need to have sustainability so that then Brendan can focus on, number one, running the organization and not, worrying about sort of chasing these small grants. He needs to be on the ground running the organization, supporting the staff to be able to give the proper support on the ground. Again, and I don't want to belabor the point, but we are dealing with neighborhoods that have some of the most vulnerable families without other supports, and so this isn't without risk, and we need to make sure that those on-the-ground folks have the support they need. So Dan, many of you will know Dan. He's the supervisor of those neighborhood support workers and some of the program staff. Dan needs to be, and Dan's position is the one we don't have ongoing funding for. So Brendan and Dan are out there kind of supporting these neighborhood groups. Brendan's, working night and day, weekends to do these grant applications that are very minimal. He's spending lots of time with all of our organizations, with many of you, at neighborhood events. It's haphazard. It's not. We can't really settle in and build the kind of organization we want to build because we're chasing little bits of money just to stand still. And so I can't stand it. It's a colossal waste of time, these little grants. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to those grant makers. They're wonderful and they're needed, and they're wonderful sometimes for small project in neighborhoods or whatever, but they're not appropriate for staff, for ongoing staff that's needed. We need sustainable funding.
Okay, thank you. It's probably more appropriate for Brendan when he comes up, but I'm curious as to if there's any possible way to estimate the amount of time that's actually put into those grant applications.
I probably couldn't answer that. That's probably a better question for Brendan. But I mean, I've spent a lot of my career writing grants, and they take a ton of time. You have to have a relationship with the funder. You have to write reports afterwards. It's one thing if it's 150,000, but for 2,000, it's the same amount of work, whether it's 150 or 2, and it's a lot of hours.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll ask him when he comes up,
okay.
And to shorten the question, I'll just say number 1, and then you can tell because you'll know what I'm talking about.
And Councillor Wetstein.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm nervous to raise the question because of the quality of the presentation and the importance of the issue. But I'm going to raise a question from a different perspective, and I think you hit 2 words, sustainability and responsibility. And we had a coffee together, and I appreciate that, full disclosure. And one of my struggles is really the provincial relationship. We as municipalities tend to be peripherally involved on a one-off basis, sometimes a little longer, on the social services side. We're not too happy with the province downloading social services on us at a time when we're already struggling with, for example, the tax levy. So you can't argue the importance of the 100,000. I sure would not be one to do that. But I strongly am uncertain that the province is actually fulfilling its role in any meaningful way, and they're asking you, and others that are going to be here tonight, including many of the people who generously came out, to say that's the municipality's responsibility. I don't buy that. And I don't know how to deal with that. We're going to be trying to find about $4 million to get down to what the public sees as a reasonable tax increase. So every time we add 100,000, we have to find 200 to get something so it goes down. And I'm not wanting to get into a trade here, but I'm struggling with an environmental reality that when you get into the social services arena, it seems to me what's missing is the province isn't here talking to us. They keep saying, oh, we don't want to do that anymore, municipality, you pick it up. And yet that isn't our accountability. Now, as a citizen of Guelph, I'd hate to lose the value, and especially the hard work that's being done. I don't know if you can comment on that or help me with that, but I'd appreciate a little bit of help. Thanks.
I would be delighted to. I think it's a really good question. And I respectfully disagree that it's not a municipal responsibility. I think the province's role is social services. I do not believe the GNSC is social services. I believe the GNSC is democracy in action. It creates the infrastructure for citizens to get together to form leadership bodies that then support their neighbors, all for free. You're just paying for a little tiny bit of that to put structure around those free, citizen-led, neighbor-led interactions that provide leadership that is a healthy, robust city where people are engaged and involved and feel a sense of agency in their present and in their futures. And I would say it's democracy in action. Now, the work that happens that my agency does, that the Community Health Center does, the stuff that I talked about, the parent outreach workers do, that I believe in my heart that is a provincial jurisdiction, and the province should pay for that. And we're not here asking money for that. We're here asking for money to sustain the infrastructure of the GNSC, which is the most amazing piece of magic I believe that this whole province has, because it offers citizen leadership and partners it with organizational, provincial, agency leadership. And I believe it's direct democracy. So a neighborhood leader can phone me up, a director of service at Family and Children's Services, and say, I'm really worried about some kids. Do you think we can problem solve here? That doesn't happen in other communities. They can phone the executive director of the CHC. They can phone a senior leader at CMHA. They can phone the chief of police if they need to. They have relationships that is I've never heard of it. It's incredible. And in fact, when we had the day that Kathy was, Councillor Downer was speaking of this Adverse Childhood Experiences Day, was all the social services senior leaders and the LIN came together to hear about from a number of speakers, one of which was Jean Clinton. And Jean Clinton is a child psychiatrist at McMaster, and she came up to speak about this brain development stuff that I was telling you about. And she's an amazing speaker and very inspirational, and really helps to explain how the brain develops in ways that the rest of us that aren't neurosurgeons can understand. And she talked about, she's on a special advisor committee to the Premier in the province, and she talked about wanting to follow what happens in Guelph, because she said she's never seen anything like it. She thinks it's amazing, this amazing partnership that we've had. We couldn't do it without the infrastructure of the GNSC, because there isn't then access to community leaders. And I just believe that it's a municipal responsibility to create spaces for citizens to grow. So that would be my response to that.
One quick follow-up question. What you're describing is something that, I'm going to ask you an unfair question. I don't expect you to answer it because it's ours to answer. And that is the priority setting. For us to do this, we've got to cut something. So you're going to leave us with that challenge. Thank you.
That wasn't a question.
Unless you'd like to answer it.
No, all I can say is in my organization I'm involved in I'm getting this from the mayor. We make choices all the time, and it does come down to that. I respect that's a difficult decision for you. I do, yeah.
Councillor Piper as well.
Yes, building on that, and I know there's other presentations and delegations to come along a similar lines, and I don't know whether this will come out in those other presentations, but during my time on the FNCS board, the calculation of investment to return on investment for healthy communities was about $1 for every $1 spent. You save $7 down the line in
social services, policing, healthcare outcomes, those types of later in life. So I'm just wondering, you know, if we're making a business case for an investment, do you have updated stats, or are those available that you could point us to and where to look?
You know, I don't have updated stats. Those are real ballpark numbers because it's very hard to measure things that don't happen. And in child welfare, you're measuring things that don't happen. Prevention is a hard thing to measure. There are proxy measures that we can look at. However, yeah, that's kind of that's stats, the one that we have used and that we have referred to. I think maybe that Mo Brubaker way back when did those calculations and estimates. And so not only does it save because you're front end loading and it's cheaper to do it at the front end than the back end, it's also much more effective. You think about your own life. You go to your doctor, you go to a counselor, you go to meet with your child's school teacher. Those are in moment in time in your life. They aren't meaningful in any major way. The things that are meaningful in your life are your friendships, your neighbors, your relationships. Some people have not had the privilege of having those in their life for many, many reasons that are beyond their control. These neighborhood groups provide that ability for them to have relationships and build relationships that help to make them into healthy families, healthy human beings. And if they can't prevent that particular parent from having some particular struggle in their life, that person is now what we call a secondary protective factor for that child. So that if that child's parent, let's say mom is depressed, can't get off the couch, we now have a network of people around that child, and so they're going to go to, you know, Linda next door because Linda's been over for coffee so many times, and Linda said, hey kiddo, if you ever need, come on over here and play with. And so we have these natural relationships that occur, and that relationship is going to prevent that little child from becoming scared because her mom's not getting off the couch. Linda's going to, you know, neighbor Linda, I'm making that up, it's not a real name, it's going to create safety around that child, both psychological and physical safety for that child, that had it not happen, I like to say, you know, if we don't prevent, these are all $1 million kids or more that cost the system a lot of money, and our system, I hate to tell you, we're not very effective. Child welfare does not do the job that we don't fix child abuse. We are band-aids at best. And so those early relationships are fixing it. They heal. They heal those the damages or the struggles in those families. So,
thank you for your delegation. Your passionate articulation of the intangibles has been a real inspiration. Thank you.
Thanks.
And that is it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So next up, from the Guelph Police Service, I think it's the only police officer in the room. Oh, sorry, Chief. Oh boy, that's gonna be on YouTube in about an hour, that one. That's funny. Arif, how are you?
Good, yourself?
Good. Thank you. Please go right ahead.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor Guthrie, council, city staff, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Arif Hashim. I'm a sergeant with the Guelph Police Service, and I'm on here on behalf of the Guelph Police Service to speak in support of the Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition. Currently, I supervise the Community Mobilization Unit at the Police Service. And one of my roles is, and full disclosure, I do sit on the GNSC partner panel. Prior to my position, I was always aware of neighborhood groups, but since then I've come to understand the important role and how valuable neighborhood groups are to our community. Neighborhood groups actually embrace the philosophy of community policing. As identified by the Ontario Associations of Chiefs of Police, the Ontario's mobilization and engagement model of community policing defines community policing as the process by which police and other community members partner to improve community well-being, safety, and security through joint problems identification, analysis, response, and evaluation. The provincial government just recently released a document this month titled Community Safety and Well-Being Planning Framework, a shared commitment in Ontario. This document identifies 4 areas to ensure local plans are efficient and effective as possible in making communities safer and healthier. The 4 areas are social development, prevention, risk intervention, and incident response. Neighborhood groups play an important role in all four areas. I feel that they're very beneficial in a number of ways. They enhance communication and collaboration. There's an increased engagement of community groups, residents, and private sectors in local initiatives and networks. Assist in the transformation of service delivery, including realignment of resources and responsibilities to better respond to priority risks and needs. To encourage healthier, more productive individuals that positively contribute to the community. Increase feelings of safety and being cared for, creating an environment that will encourage newcomers to the community, and reduce investment in and reliance in incident response. Just last week, I was present at a town hall meeting with councilperson Andy Van Helmond and James Gordon. And the concerns and issues raised at this meeting by the neighbors could be refocused in an efficient and effective neighborhood group. This has resulted in a follow-up meeting that I'm actually going to be attending next week with Council James Gordon and I believe Council Andy Van Helmond. Neighborhood groups are able to identify crime, community safety, public disorder, and road safety problems. The neighborhood group could also help develop and implement initiatives to respond to the identified problems in partnership with the police. Currently, our city has 13 identified neighborhood groups. With the growth of our city, these neighborhood groups will only expand and new neighborhood groups will be identified. The hard work of Brendan Johnson and Dave Evans at the GNSC has led to the success of the neighborhood groups. The GNSC acts as a conduit and a connector with all these neighborhood groups. This has led to creating an environment of cooperation, communication, collaboration, and engagement. The additional funding that is being requested will only further the success of this endeavor. The Guelph Police Service 2016 and 2018 Strategic Business Plan has a number of objectives. Neighborhood groups help further several of these objectives. 1, promote and enhance road safety in partnership with the public and community agencies. 2, support victims of crimes and tragic circumstances by engaging community partners. Mutually engage with youth in Guelph communities and champion our community and our members. I feel that the neighborhood groups also further the mission statement of the Guelph Police Service. That being, through partnerships, we are dedicated to enhancing the quality of life, ensuring the safety of all who live, work, and play in our safe and diverse community. Any support to the GNSC would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions at this time? Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks very much for the presentation. I had seen that, with your presentation, and there was a letter of support from the chief as well. Obviously, no doubt that the neighborhood group does a lot of great work, but I'm going to give you a hard question because you're up here. So okay. You're asking for 100,000 extra. Would the community of Guelph be better overall with 100,000 extra supporting the GNSC and reducing the police budget by 100,000? Given the incredible benefits that come from this relating to safety and security? Or would it be better off with the police budget retaining that 100,000 rather than transferring it over?
I think I echo some of the comments made by Aaron Harvey earlier, and that is, and I think Council Leanne Piper had mentioned about how $1 sometimes equates to $7 down the road. And I think that is true with these neighborhood groups. There's some unseen benefits that we can't measure as to what these neighborhood groups do. So $100,000 to the neighborhood groups, would that far outweigh going to the neighborhood groups than the police services budget? Me personally, I would say yes. That I think that the $100,000 is better spent with the neighborhood groups, with the benefits down the roads that we're able to recoup.
Great, thank you very much.
I thought you'd pass that question to the chief. Because he's here, everybody, just so you know. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
I wonder if they're just scared because they have the uniform on or something.
Yeah. Okay, who is next? Lynn. Lynn Klustra from the Brant Avenue Neighborhood Group is here. Jennifer McLeod, you're in the wings, okay? So you're up next. And thank you very much for coming.
Hi,
Over to you.
I'm Lynn Klustra. I'm the neighborhood support worker at the Brant Avenue Neighborhood Group. I brought along a community members who I'm going to let take on the speaking for tonight.
Hi, Mayor Guthrie and council, city staff. My name is Kim Gattery, and I'm going to cry. I'm going to start. I'm just going to try and read through it because I know I've got my time, and I have no idea how long this is going to take me. Everybody wants to feel safe. Feeling safe helps us sleep and therefore manage life's many obstacles. Told you I was going to cry. The Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition is, for me, life. The knowledge that neighborhood groups build a bridge to breaking the cycle of poverty through empowerment, most especially vis-a-vis our children, our offspring, and youth are the future. To quote John Haywood, Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm going to list point form what each characteristic that the Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition has fostered through their coordination, effort, and administration to and in support of the Brant Neighborhood Group, which has allowed me to grow and renewed my hope in myself. Empowerment, the opportunity to give back through the various programs leading to an even greater self-esteem. Personal social growth. By passing on these skills and strengths, we can inspire the next generation. As a direct result of my involvement with the GNSC and the Brant Neighborhood Group, I have been able to inspire both of my children, boys, to not only participate in Brant events, they are also both volunteers for the youth group and are coming up with program ideas of their own to better the physical and mental health of other kids in our area. They care about their impact to society and their responsibilities as contributing members of this society and want to share their coping skills and education with some that may not have the same strengths and resources. Inspiration and motivation. By being a member of the GNSC, a community of people who truly care, no matter what, no matter where, and definitely no matter why, I continue to be motivated and inspired by what I see others do every day. Trust as can only be established through consistency and respect. Having outreach workers that live and participate within the same neighborhoods, removing the stigma that mental health is a contributing factor to socioeconomic pressure, when in fact poverty is a contributing factor to mental health, and all of that lovely ball of wax, which recycles when deprived of all of the above. I can't even finish that statement, so I'm just going to skip to the next page. The knowledge that we not only provide support, but are supported. Each satellite location and central neighborhood group office and space really is a team within a team, similar to an org chart and a family tree. A true sense of community. Food, food, and more food. Access to garden fresh, garden yields from our community gardens, local pantries, and every single morning meal and or breakfast program that the GNSC supports and relays through to street level. The true and unconditional open door policy, yes, I mean open door. Again, no matter what, where, or why. A general sense of neighborhood watch-like strategies. We know our neighbors through various programs and activities and get to know the local children as a result of the coffee hours, festivals, carnivals, events, activities, and the thousands of volunteers that coordinate and inspire us throughout Guelph every year. The freedom to speak our minds, I'm here, and knowing that it's okay, even when the opinions aren't necessarily popular. This comes from that first item, the empowerment, and all of the self-esteem and belief within ourselves that comes with it. Emotional support for our young. Lead by example. Youth groups, running and reading programs, any and all activities that engage the minds of our children and their friends to participate, support, and or otherwise contribute to anything that brings about a positive change and influence. And the knowledge that there are organizations such as the GNSC that will support them throughout their lives, throughout these programs, first as participants, then as volunteers, then coordinators, and eventually as leaders. Like good old Cheers, going somewhere where everybody knows your name. And the fact that the kids feel safe in opening up and sharing when they need help, there is no shame. And we need to eliminate the stigma of mental health, the new elephant in the room. For me, and what I see in the Brant neighborhood group, it's my last statement, the GNSE provides a lifeline of support with far-reaching tentacles that, if cut off, would quickly devastate entire economies and communities at the lowest levels of the income spectrum. I need GNSE like I need air, water, and a good hot bath on a Sunday night. It's who I am, and it's who I always want to be.
Thank you very, very much. Now, you know what? One of the things, and that just for keeping of the minutes here, can you just say your full name again for us?
Kimberly Gadoury, G-A-D-O-U-R-Y.
Okay, you got that? Okay, great. Now, any questions at this time? Councillor Alt?
Thank you very much, Ms. Gadoury. I really appreciate how you've expressed your personal heartfelt support for the Neighborhood Support Coalition. You raised an issue that I'd never thought of before, and that is, and I don't even know if you can answer it, I might have to make this number 2 for Mr. Johnson, but the issue of the relationship of the Neighborhood Support Coalition and those who are suffering and fighting their demons with mental illness, addiction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any possible way that you could identify how significant that particular aspect of support is within the Neighborhood Support Coalition?
Well, I have a social anxiety disorder, and I get a little weepy sometimes. And for me...
You've been great, by the way.
For me, having Lynn from the first years when I moved to the neighborhood group in 2009, and constantly always being available for me, I have developed relationships with most of the neighbors up and down the street, not far, all the children. They come to my house, they come to my door, and they know they can come there and get help. And I support them because I have the support. And she supports me because she has the support. It's like a little food chain.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for that presentation. It's not so much a question for you, maybe a question to the chair. I'm sensing a theme in our delegations tonight, which I'm happy to hear. At what point am I allowed to open up the conversation to staff? Are there openings in, because I don't want to jump to the next conversation or the next theme in delegations before I ask questions of staff. I am being prompted with some questions, though.
Yeah, that's a fair question. So our last presentation, excuse me, everybody, around this ask is going to be Brendan, and so maybe at that point, before we get into sort of other themes, we could it just depends on how, I'm getting some shaking of heads, but it will depend on how long this takes. Like if it's 2 hours of this, which is fine, by the way, it's totally fine. I might want to take a break, and then we can kind of decide at that point. If it's not, maybe we can keep going. After that, 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, after that, there's only about 5 or 6 delegations, Councillor Gibson. So depending on how long this section takes, I say we would just get through, and then we'll just be able to talk to staff at the end.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I'm a volunteer. I'm not sure what the question was going to be, but I'm not staff.
Oh, it was more a question of process for tonight.
Oh.
No problem.
Okay.
Thanks for being there and listening to that, though. Yeah. Nothing further, so thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. Jennifer McLeod, you are up next from the Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health. And we do have a presentation for you. There it is. And Alicia, you're in the wings. You're up next, okay? I'll turn it over to you. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Guthrie, councillors, city staff, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm Jennifer McLeod from Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health, and I'm here to support the Guelph Neighbourhood Support Coalition. So we know that 50% of health outcomes can be attributed to social and economic factors such as income, education, employment, and social supports. Differences in these social and economic factors can lead to population differences in health, which are called health inequities. If we were to ignore inequities, we would be asking individuals to make immense efforts to maintain health because they face insurmountable challenges. To address health inequities, the World Health Organization emphasizes the importance of strategies that increase opportunities for employment, education, and early child development among the entire population. A community's overall wellness is affected by the health of each neighborhood. In 2011, Public Health released a report on social determinants of health that showed patterns of inequities in Guelph neighborhoods. We examined 8 social determinants of health indicators and 4 health outcome indicators. And I'm just going to show you a quick selection of that. These maps show that each neighborhood has unique characteristics and that some neighborhoods face more challenges than others. This first map shows the rates of children living in low income in Guelph neighborhoods, followed by rates of residents of Guelph neighborhoods who did not complete a high school education, and then lastly, unemployment rates in Guelph neighborhoods. There is good evidence that issues such as poverty, early childhood development, education, employment and working conditions have a profound effect on people's individual health behaviors and health outcomes. Research has shown, for example, that recent immigrants can better integrate into Canadian cities that have communities with strong social and cultural support networks. People supported by their communities experience better health. A feeling of belonging to a community gives people the sense of being a part of something larger than themselves. The extent to which people participate in their community and feel like they can belong positively influences their long-term physical and mental health. The community is where all sectors converge and where it's often easiest for the various players to come to the table to establish local priorities and to develop shared strategies to address inequalities. Communities are also in a position to mitigate the health impacts of the factors that we've been discussing. And they can play a pivotal role in creating environments that are supportive of healthy choices for all citizens. So you heard from Aaron Harvey, and you'll hear from many others, including Brendan Johnson, about the work of the GNSC. The GNSC supports neighborhood groups that are inclusive, engaging, responsive, and that build a sense of belonging. They do this by building relationships, providing supports, connecting parents and individuals with services and with their community. The GNSC guides the neighborhood groups to ensure they are developing and delivering programs and events that are meeting the needs of the community. They support neighborhood groups to shape themselves to be representative of their whole neighborhood while also being part of something larger across the city. The coalition brings the neighborhood groups together to share information and resources. They provide support to neighborhoods, including distribution of available funding resources and advocating for community issues. In short, the work of the GNSC fosters health equity. Public Health is fully supportive of the work of the GNSC and would like to see this work continue to thrive so that the GNSC can continue to strengthen health and wellness in neighborhoods. Thank you.
Great, and thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation at this time? Councillor Hoffman.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor Guthrie. Thank you for your presentation, Jennifer. I had an opportunity to read through the document that you reference in your presentation, and I wondered if you could speak to Council about Sudbury's experience. Now, I know that they are calculated projections, but could you speak to those numbers?
Sure. So, yes, in one of the documents that I cited, that was the experience of the city of Sudbury. And they did a study that was similar to the study that we did at Public Health, looking at patterns of inequities in neighborhoods in Sudbury. They took it one step further, which was a really interesting thing to do. And what they did was they did calculations to see if everyone in the city had the same opportunities as those living in the least deprived neighborhoods. What would it look like in that city? And they found that there would be 1 fewer infant deaths, 17 fewer teen births, over 11,000 fewer obese people, 264 fewer hospitalizations for mental health episodes, just over 14,000 fewer emergency department visits, almost 10,000 more people who rate their health as excellent or very good, and 131 more residents living past the age of 75. Thanks for that question.
And Councillor Van Helmen?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Jennifer, I noticed, and thank you for the presentation. Your sources for the unemployment and children living in low income are 2006.
Yes.
Do you do every 5, 10 years? Do you do another study or another?
So typically what we do is we do it with the cycle of the census data. We, as with most organizations, didn't do a new one with the 2011 census data because of issues in the methodology, the way that data was collected. So excitingly, the 2016, the last bit of census data will just be released November 29th, and we're already working with the data that has been released, and we're going to be refreshing all of these statistics.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Gibson, did you have your hand up on that? No? Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Alicia, are you here, Alicia? Yes. And Helen, you're in the wings, okay? Welcome.
Hi.
To both of you. Hello. Hello.
I am here by the sounds of everyone else's pieces, very unprepared. But I'm here really to speak from the heart. My story with the GNSC started about 9 years ago when I gave birth to Kaya, and I had to make the decision to stay home because I couldn't afford to go to work and pay for childcare. So I stayed home and took care of my daughter, and just through something as simple as garden fresh boxes, I connected with Two Rivers Neighborhood Group, and I went every month to pick up my garden fresh box, and the neighborhood support worker that was there at the time just slowly started chipping away at me and building a relationship with me. And before I knew it, I became a Healthy Living Peer Leader Volunteer, which is a program that is the GNSC and the Guelph Community Health Center partnership. And from there, I became a yoga instructor because of the pushing and pushing of that neighborhood support worker that knew it was a passion and knew that it was something I had and I wanted to share. And I ended up doing that. And then from there, I became part of the leadership team, and now I'm the neighborhood support worker in that neighborhood group, and I'm there to push the passions of the community members in my neighborhood group. I have to say that through my experience with the GNSC, I think the GNSC story is that of relationship building. I think it's that of creating space for people to come and feel safe to share their stories. I think it's in a world of provincial, I think we talked a little bit about the provincial and the municipality and the responsibilities, I feel the supports, but I also think we offer things that aren't offered by those provincial supports. And a piece of that is that relationship building. We get to know each other, we help support and empower each other within those community groups. And I know from my own story, there's lots of mental health. There's lots of addictions that run all through my family and extended family. And I know that through my work with the GNSC, we touch a lot of those people that wouldn't otherwise come out. And as the yoga instructor for the past 5 years within there, a volunteer yoga instructor, I know the majority of the people that are coming to my classes are people that are struggling with mental health, with addictions. And they don't feel comfortable going to a lot of the places, or they can't afford to go to the places that are in the community that could offer those same services. So they come to us because they feel comfortable there. They feel like they have a place. And I think overall, relationship building, relationship building, relationship building. It's about building up those communities so that we can support each other And then again, down the line, it saves money. And I think when I had to stay home because I couldn't afford, my family was living off of ODSP. And now we don't need ODSP because now I'm working as a neighborhood support worker and I have the money to support my own family. Yes, that's saving the province money and not you money, I get that. But ultimately it's saving our government's money. And I think if we have the means to support all of the amazing partnerships that come through the GNSE, then it's something that's really, really important to do. And I have to say, when I first started with volunteering with the GNSE, I thought that the neighborhood support worker that I was dealing with was such an amazing human being to be able to build those relationships and support and pull out those passions in people. And now that I'm more embedded into the GNSE, I see that it's not just him. It's every single person that's involved with that GNSE, from the people, the partners, through the health center, public health, FNCS, right up to Brendan and Dan. They offer that support, they offer that empowerment, and because of it, it trickles right down through our services. And I think it's a super, super important service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being there for support for your mom. Is any questions at all for Alicia? Okay, thank you very much. Helen, has Helen